Welcome to the Editor's Podcast for the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. My name is Dr. Linda Snetselaar, and I am Editor-in-Chief of the journal. And today for our podcast, we have with us Dr. Megan Winkler, and she is a professor in the Department of Behavioral, Social, and Health Education Sciences at Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. Welcome, Dr. Winkler.
Thanks so much for having me.
I have just a few questions for you, and this is on the topic of marketing strategies and their effect on purchasing sugar-sweetened beverages. So the very first question is, why should concern exist over purchasing sugar-sweetened beverages?
Well, I think there's been a lot of concern over purchasing of sugar-sweetened beverages for a few decades now. And that's very well supported because we do know that high and frequent intakes of sugar-sweetened beverages have been consistently linked to harmful outcomes, things like excess weight and cardiovascular consequences and the like. And we know that these conditions really do have, important impacts on people's lives, as well as even our US healthcare costs. And I think even kind of bringing another piece to this is that it's not only sugar-sweetened beverages, but recently we're seeing an increase in observational evidence that suggests artificially sweetened beverages could have similarly harmful outcomes. And our group seems to think that this might suggest that a focus on both sugar and artificially sweetened beverages could be necessary for public health nutrition.
What are some of the existing retailer marketing strategies for sugar-sweetened beverages that are sold particularly in convenience stores?
There are so many strategies, Linda. Just to kind of give some context to why I'm saying there's so many, we know some of the estimates out there are suggesting that the majority of marketing budgets are actually going to in-store marketing strategies over other forms that might be a little more obvious to us these days, such as airwaves and social media. And, while that's the case, it still seems to me that, there's still a large majority of health professionals and even the public at large that really still are quite unaware of these strategies. So I'm glad we're able to talk about some of them today. In terms of some specific strategies, there's kind of some variety of categorizations. One that I think is really commonly known in the field is impulse purchasing. So putting products placed at the checkout when customers are waiting in line. Another set of specific marketing tactics are more like priming approaches. So these are things that we put on maybe the outside of a store to kind of get a customer to think about something they might want to buy on the way into the store. It can also be actually something that the customer comes to see right when they walk through the door. And so some of this is advertisements, and some of this is actually product placement right at the front of the store. And in fact, we're also doing interviews right now with independent and chain store managers of convenience and other small stores. And they're telling us that indeed, that's one of the key places that they try to place their products if they need to move one, is right there at the front of the store. Some other kind of related, I think, but important advertisement strategies that we will see in some C-stores are things like the healthy halo effect. So healthy halo effects are known to be on product labels and packaging, but we also can experience that within a retail setting. So for instance, in C-stores, you might see images of fresh produce up on the walls, and it's really bright and really clean. And what can happen then in places like that is we start to make kind of psychological errors as customers that even though I'm grabbing a 20-ounce Coke off the shelf or my honey bun, somehow now I think that's less calories in this store than perhaps in other stores I might visit. Some of the other marketing strategies that I think are important to comment on here are things like shelf placement. seeing something at eye level versus at my feet is really important for whether I'm going to pick something off the shelf. And even the relative exposure and ubiquity of products is important. So we know from work from CSPI that customers are coming into contact with sugar sweetened beverages up to 25 to 30 times in that store. That's how many locations they're putting that. And so for convenience stores, it's a smaller footprint. And so there may be multiple placement locations, but what we have tended to look at in these venues is something called kind of shelf space, or how ubiquitous the product is in the store. And in fact, in our study, we found that customers have a really high exposure to sugar sweetened beverages in convenience stores. In fact, the average customer was being exposed to 200 feet of sugar sweetened beverages. And the highest exposure we actually recorded was 900 feet. So it's a lot of feet and exposure to have a customer be considering for a single product. And then, of course, there are things like sales and pricing promotions that are super important marketing tactics, but it was actually not something we looked at in this study. And I think the final thing I'll kind of just say about this is, not only are there a lot of strategies and a lot of different types, but there can be really common. And so we found even in this work that having advertisements of unhealthy food and beverages, as well as sweetened beverage placement at the checkout, was occurring for approximately 70% of our customers. So they're very common and not totally ubiquitous, but pretty high up there.
So interesting. Thank you. How do these marketing strategies then relate to what a customer might actually purchase?
Yeah. So the upshot here is that really they're going to likely purchase the product when they come into exposure to these different strategies. But I will say a couple of things about this kind of summary is that, one, some of these strategies definitely have variation. Some of that variation is across product categories. So what we see works for sugar sweetened beverages might actually not always work for fresh produce, for instance, or vice versa. And then the other place we see variation around these things is also across store types. So going back to our comparisons of kind of corner stores, convenience stores to grocery stores. So, in public health nutrition, there's been a really key focus on impulse placement at the checkout. We have lots of studies that have looked at this. And in our work, we actually didn't see an effect of impulse placement of sugar sweetened beverages on sweetened beverage purchasing. And we think this is because of the actual store type we're focused on, which is convenience stores and small food stores. And this is because more times than not, a customer may have already decided what they were going to purchase by the time they get to the checkout. And in addition, your checkout time is only merely seconds in a convenience store versus potentially minutes when you're waiting with your grocery cart in the grocery store. But the other two things I want to mention about how marketing strategies relate to customer purchases are really two of the key effects we saw in our work in this study. And the first one was that there was a clear kind of priming effect going on where we only measured this by advertisements, so versus actual product placement at the front of the store. But even still with the advertisements, we saw about a 30% increase in customer purchasing of sweetened beverages when there was an ad on the exterior of that store or hanging from the ceiling inside of the store to really kind of help create that visual stimuli for considering that product. And then the other key effect, in addition to priming that we saw, was that really these marketing effects can and likely do operate cumulatively. So the more exposures of any type of that a customer has of these marketing strategies, the more likely they are to purchase a product. And in fact, we found that customers who experienced at least more than one of these marketing features, no matter the type, were purchasing sugar sweetened beverages at a rate 50% higher than customers who were only experiencing one of the marketing strategies or less. And there has been some prior work that has kind of also found this. Deborah Cohen at Rand and her colleagues found a similar effect when they looked at customer BMI and the cumulative effects of sugar sweetened beverage placement in the grocery stores. And so really, to us, this is suggesting that we probably need to be really careful in public health policy to potentially not narrow in on only one or two marketing strategies to consider for regulation or to consider for changing. And while, we have a political environment where maybe narrowing in on one or two could be helpful or more feasible, the risk we run when we do that is if we're not as comprehensive, we're likely creating opportunities for new marketing strategies to be created in a way, things we've not thought about yet that could also be developed to really help to, again, help customers make those purchases in a way that we don't always detect.
So important as we think about nutrition policy and public health as well. So excellent ideas. Thank you so much. And then my final question relates to people actually working in the field today. And I was wondering, what should the message be to practicing clinical dietitians who are working with clients, many of whom are probably going to be frequently purchasing sugar sweetened beverages?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of key messages to have registered dietitians really think about. And I think the first one is definitely when working with their clients. I think the first thing that you have to do to help create behavior change is make people aware of things. And so I think RDs are probably already doing this, but can continue to do this where they're really trying to make their clients aware of these various marketing tactics and also the reasons that companies and retailers are using those tactics. By having that kind of awareness, it allows you to enter these spaces with much more of a conscientious mind that might allow you to decide how much you want to play into certain strategies or not. And I think too, there's always those good strategies of helping to then curb those in-store tactics while you're there. So again, telling clients to, make a plan for what they're going to purchase before they go, and, constantly keeping in mind what actually is their health goal as they actually choose every single item off of a shelf to purchase that day. But I do think, we have to remember dietitians are part of a broader society, and we can also think about the ways they might want to impact changes in stores even beyond their individual client coaching. So for instance, thinking about ways they might work to create broader policy systems and environmental changes. And there's lots of ways we can all do this. All RDs can contact their legislative representatives to share their perspectives as a constituent on proposed policies related to healthy food retail. As we have seen, some of these sugar sweetened beverage taxations come across cities, as well as things like healthy checkouts. In fact, even RDs really need to give their voice, even in shaping future policies, such as the next farm bill, and really thinking about ways to make it easier for consumers to make healthy choices in these spaces. And I think while I always make those recommendations, I also think it's important to kind of help everyone understand that, while we want to advocate for these healthier changes, there are real obstacles in the way that we also need to think about and address. Some of those are things that policy could address, such as vendor product agreements for sugar sweetened beverages and the like, and really thinking about the ways those drive these marketing strategies. But there's also other challenges at play. Our independent corner stores and convenience stores have very, very small retail margins. And so they don't have the space to take risks that would that would actually harm their actual ability to stay open as a store. And so that means they can't eliminate all sugar sweetened beverages. And so for me, this means thinking about how do we build a safety net for retailers to be able to take those kinds of risks in a way that then we could learn more about consumer behavior and again, prompt it to be healthier. I think the point I'm trying to say here, Linda, is that simply, I think there's a lot of things that registered dietitians can do to help both their clients directly, as well as society at large, to have healthier choices in food retail.
Yes, I totally agree. And you're providing such important messages, I think, to registered dietitians as they're working with clients. And such novel ideas, I think, are incredibly important. And just as you were saying, a policy like the Farm Bill could certainly benefit from many of the ideas that you're offering, and possibly even dietary guidelines might benefit from some of the ideas that you just offered. You know, how do we present things like the dietary guidelines to the public? So thank you so very much.
Thank
I
you.
truly appreciate your sharing this information. And I think that marketing products, especially sugar sweetened beverages, can be so useful as dietitians are working in clinical settings. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Linda, for the opportunity to share some of our work. I really appreciate it.